Like the Bruff Superior, there's something about these bikes, about the men that built them. Each one was individual, and for all their faults, easily outweighed by the sheer performance, the looks, you know, the whole legend of these bikes. It's a lot of fun. I'm thrilled at my age I'm still able to ride them. I love this bike! Welcome to that episode of Jay Leno's Garage. Today we're featuring, well, just an extraordinary motorcycle. First I'm going to show you the standard stock version. This is a 1951 Vincent Black Shadow. This is the legendary bike, world's fastest at the time, still extremely quick, 1000cc V-twin. Everything on this bike is exactly as it would have been in 1951, with the exception of these modern mirrors here. It's 6 volt. Yeah, it's exactly as it left the factory. It's a 100% original bike, fast, fun to drive, comfortable. But a company came along, much like Singer. You know how Singer would find Porsches and, quote, reimagine them, update them, use carbon fiber, make them a little faster, maybe handle a little bit better. Well, that's what a man named Patrick Godet has done. Sadly, he passed away back in 2018, I think, in November of that month. Just a legendary motorcycle guy and a Vincent enthusiast to the core. Here, let's take a look at that bike. Come on. This was and still is, I think, the ultimate, the most beautiful cafe racer. This is the Egli-Vincent, a guy named Fritz Egli out of Switzerland. He was a motorcycle racer and frame builder, and although the Black Shadow was fast, the suspension, which was pretty good back in the day, by the time the 60s came around and the 70s, a little old-fashioned, did not handle, well, like a modern bike. And Fritz Egli made his own frame. In fact, he showed it to Philip Vincent, and he was actually quite impressed with it. It's a bit more rigid, it's a bit stiffer. You see this has twin shocks on each side, whereas the Vincent has 2 shocks in the center. It was excellent in period, but you know, as time marches on, things came along a little bit better. This has been updated. Instead of 1000 cc's, it's 1330. It's got an electric start. Yet it has a lot of the classic 50s cafe racer things like, well, for example, the brakes. This front brake here is, I think Patrick Godet rather, designed this himself. It's based on the Fontana brake, you know, the 4-leading shoe brake. This was what people had before discs, and discs came along and surpassed it. And these were very, very good. They were quite successful. It's got modern McCuney carburetors on it. Again, that has Amos, which work fine, but if you're gonna compete with modern machinery, you have to have some modern things to it. You have a, this is your oil tank right here, and this, see, the gas goes on each side, and this whole centerpiece is a long tube about that long and holds a couple of quarts of oil. This one is a 4-speed transmission, although later ones had a 5-speed. I've had this one for quite a while. Just beautifully designed, from the gas tank to those kind of sensuous looking exhaust pipes there in stainless steel. They're all mechanical brakes. There's no hydraulics on this thing. These are incredibly fast bikes. I mean, 150 miles an hour in 1950. You know, Rolly Free was the guy who set the record. I think you all know that legendary story. Rolly Free went out racing. He put his leathers on and he went 149.1, 149.2. He just couldn't make 150, so he took off the leathers and he just went in a bathing suit, lying on the tank flat out, and then went over 150 miles an hour. It's a legendary photo. I'm not sure if I can show it because I don't have the rights to it, but I've got a lot of Rolly Free's trophies and a lot of his, you know, he was a watchmaker. He used to repair watches too, so I've got his little toolbox and just a lot of cool stuff like that. I like that kind of memorabilia. This also has a tachometer, which Vincent did not have. They had such torque, you just shift by feel. It does not have the hydraulic front end as that one does. It has a modern front end. I don't know if that's a Seriani, I'm not sure, I can't remember. But as you can see, it's a modern version of a classic motorcycle. This still has that classic look. When you're behind these handlebars and you look at this chronometric speedometer, that's the cool thing. You know, a lot of the British bikes, especially from this period, you get up about 60 miles an hour and the speedometer's doing that. You're just going back and forth. This is built like a watch, so it stops on each numeral like. So when you get it up near the ton, when you're going to 85, 90, you go 90, 91, 92, 90, you just watch it stop at each, it's mesmerizing. You'll run into a tree if you, well, I'll tell you a funny story. I was driving it on the freeway, and I was watching it climb, and it got a little above 90, and I was so mesmerized by looking at that speedometer, I didn't see the cop behind me. See the blue light pulls me over. He goes, "How fast you going?" And I just played down. I said, "No, officer, I'm sorry, I don't." You're going 90 miles an hour. I said, "Oh, I didn't realize." He says, "You know how I know you're going 90 miles an hour? I clocked you off your speedometer." He started yelling at me because he was back here, but he could still see the clock, the needle on 90. "Oh, I'm sorry." And he actually he wasn't too bad. He asked about the bike, and he liked how clean it was. And I said, "All right, just take it easy, you know, blah, blah." You know, so if you're by yourself, the cops will sometimes give you a break. If you're another person, that's why I always ride alone, I drive alone. You get two guys doing this on the road and they act stupid, and then you have exhibition of speed or dangerous road rage, whatever they put on the ticket. But if you're by yourself, you're more likely to get a break. This is, as I said, your oil tank here. When the bike's running, you see the oil going through this clear line here. You know, as opposed to having an oil light or like the early Bruff Superiors also had a sight glass here. You see, this is your sight glass basically to let you know that the oil is going into the tank. Notice how the engine is a stressed member. The engine hangs from the frame and holds the whole thing together. That's what makes these so light. This bike weighs 378 pounds, which is, for a 1,330cc bike, that's incredibly light. Because most motorcycles had a frame coming underneath the bike, you know, usually a loop deal with two tubes, and those get heavy. They're steel, a chromoly, and they're very heavy. The only accessory this bike has, I guess, is the electric starter, which that's all it has. It doesn't have the Kickstarter anymore, which sometimes seems a little scary. Upgraded to 12-volt electrics. This is an interesting thing on Vincent's. This was put on here because don't forget, these bikes are in their heyday in the early 50s. You had a lot of veterans. A lot of guys came back from the war with leg injuries. Maybe they couldn't shift the bike, so you could reach down, you could get a longer version, and you could shift this by hand if need be. That's kind of why that's here, but it also serves as a gear indicator. A lot of the standard Vincent features are not on this bike because this is the Cafe Racer. Next time we'll do the Black Shadow, and we'll show you all the neat things it has. You can change a wheel without using any tools, but we'll show you how to do that on that one. What else can we show you? It's got turn signals, that wonderful 4-leading shoe front brake, which Patrick designed himself. You know, he was quite a guy, Godet. He died at age 68. Which is kind of scary when you're my age. But a true artist. We talked on the phone a number of times. I was thrilled when I got this bike. He hand builds all of those. The factory is still going in France and still being very successful. I think he's produced, I know Fritz Egli, back in the 60s, he produced 100 Egli frame Vincents. And what happened was Patrick was so enamored of Fritz, they became great friends, and Fritz gave Patrick a license to produce the Egli frame because he was so impressed with his workmanship and how he went about things. I mean, you look at the welds, they're just beautiful. So those two became close friends. I know Fritz took it quite hard when he passed away. But the factory is still going. You can still get a godet-Vincent, you just can't get one built by him anymore. But the guys that run the factory do a nice job. It's right outside Normandy in France, beautiful part of the world, right near Normandy Beach. I guess that's about it. I guess the next thing to do is start it up and take it for a ride. Let me show you what this bike sounds like. Let me give it a little bit of choke here. Where are we? You want to turn on your fuel on both sides. Each carburetor has its own petcock.
These are extremely cold-blooded. It takes about 20 miles to get the oil warm. You don't want to give it full throttle until you've ridden it for at least 15 minutes or so. It's uncomfortable, it's cramped, but it's such an exciting motorcycle. Come on, let's take it out.
It's hard to gauge the impact this motorcycle had when it came out at the time of Vincent Black Shadow. It was just so much faster. Don't forget, back in the 50s, there weren't many motorcycles that could hit 100 miles an hour, let alone 120, 125, like one of these. And Patrick and Fitz have done they've kept the essence of it, they've kept the classic sound, the feel, even the vibration. You've got modern carburetors and modern machining putting the engine. This engine is oil tight. You notice there wasn't a drop of oil. You know, the English used to say if it's not on the floor, it's not in the bike. But that doesn't apply to this. Of course, there are modern bikes like Hayabusas and Kawasaki's, and they can blow the doors off this thing. But it just has such presence, such style. It makes power so low down. Most British bikes at 60, you turn in close to 4,000 RPM, a lot of them, especially in this period. This bike, look, you're barely 2,500. And this chassis does not flex at all. Don't forget, the original Vincent had suspension when most bikes had no suspension, so consequently, it's a bit of a trade-off. It wasn't going to be as stiff as a hardtail, but it was a lot more comfortable. And they were built to be touring bikes. That's what they were. They weren't, although they were fast and you could race them, they were built primarily to be touring bikes. And what Fritz had done, and Patrick too, would just make them, well, a little bit more of both. A lot more reliable for touring, and a lot faster and better handling for racing. Once you get on an open road and you're going 60 or 70 in one of these, the wind holds you up. You know, in LA traffic where you're bent over bumper to bumper, it gets a little annoying, especially when you're an old guy like me. But throwing it into bends just so nicely. Even at 65, the engine hardly breathing. One thing you don't want to do on YouTube is show the speedometer when you're going 100 miles an hour. Not the smartest thing, really. I went for a long ride on this thing over the weekend, maybe 125 miles, which isn't very much, but when you're hunched over, it is. But you know, it wasn't bad, because like I said, at freeway speeds at 75 or 80, the wind kind of holds you up, so it takes all the pressure off your back. Just leaning into corners. It's just so incredibly stable. That's the beautiful thing about it. You know, I've been riding Vincent's now for, oh my God, 45 years, something like that. I never get tired of them, never seek to astound me and amaze me. You know, all kinds of super bikes come along. And they're great and they're fast, but this seems to have a soul, you know what I'm saying? It's just like the Bruff Superior. There's something about these bikes, about the men that built them. Each one was sort of individual, and for all their faults, easily outweighed by the sheer performance, the looks, you know, the whole legend of these bikes. It's a lot of fun. I'm thrilled at my age. I'm still able to ride them. I can't make them perform as good as they can. I mean, I've seen younger guys do amazing things on these bikes, but I'm just thrilled that I'm still able to ride. You know, when you fall down, you're 25, it's like one ow. When you're my age and you fall down, ow, 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 ow. Yeah, it's not good. So anyway, listen, I'm going to go for a little ride and try not to fall off, and hopefully we'll see you guys next week. I love this bike.